kuelewa mada ya siku ya leo.
What will you do to improve the quality of legislation coming from the executive now that if you are approved, you will become the Attorney General, so that the issues of courts declaring laws enacted by Parliament as a constitution becomes a thing of the past? I have those 3 questions as of now. Thank you.
Dorcas, answer them quickly.
Thank you, sir. About the JSA, I think the positions were few.
I'm not the only one who succeeded, but I believe that it was not my time, and my time was going to...
Do they give reasons when they don't give you the job? They don't?
They don't, sir.
Okay.
They don't. About post-election violence, and me having said that there was no reason to prosecute, I want to say that I chaired a task force 3 years down the line to look at offenses that were committed subsequent to the post-election violence. The task force concluded a report that was presented to His Excellency the President, and after it was presented to the President, it was then presented to different arms of government to deal with the recommendations. But as far as prosecution is concerned, I chaired that task force as a prosecutor also.
And I was expected to look at the evidence with the lens of a prosecutor, which requires me to be sure that before I can recommend prosecution, I have sufficient evidence, and it is in the public interest, and I have a reasonable prospect of conviction. I used the law as it was, and I applied it to the circumstances, and I did my contribution to the task force, and whatever was presented to His Excellency the President was the result of the conclusion of the task force. That task force included civil society. Thank you. About bills going to Parliament and the government losing or courts declaring bills or legislation unconstitutional. First and foremost, it is the work of the courts to do that. That is one of the duties that they've been given. And if they do it, they are not doing a wrong thing. We should ask ourselves, why then the notoriety? I believe that most legislations that we have come up with of late have been to comply or to operationalize the 2010 constitutions. Most of the contents of those bills contain new jurisprudence, not only to the executive, but even to the judiciary. I take it as a testing time. We are testing the Constitution through bills, through legislation. Honorable Speaker and honorable members, a testament to this is that even in the Court of Appeal, there are issues that they've not agreed on. They have not given direction. It is a good thing for us to test a new legislation.
It will be volatile for some time, but after some times when we have matured with the 2010 Constitution, then the law will be settled. But that having been said, it is a concern if bills are declared unconstitutional when the Honorable Attorney General has contributed to them. What I would do is to find out why they have been declared unconstitutional. Number 2, I would make sure that as the Attorney General, I advise that wherever we come up with a bill, it meets the constitutional requirements as provided. Thank you.
Now, Dorcas nominee will take a batch of 333, starting with Isola, Posing, then on Kikaria, in that order.
All right, thank you.
One question each. No preambles.
Okay, please allow me to ask two. Chairman, no preamble. You have served in the AG's office before. Are there instances where the AG then advised the executive, and the advice was not taken. What will you do if this committee finds you suitable in the National Assembly and you advise the executive on different matters and your advice is not taken? The second question is that there are areas or there are circumstances where cases have been lost in court, as you have said, but then the judiciary then orders compensation to the litigants. My question is, why should taxpayers carry the burden of the compensation while there is an officer in the executive whose decisions have occasioned the judiciary asking that that money should be compensated? And we have many litigants who've never been compensated that the judiciary asked that they get compensated. And lastly, the 2/3 gender rule. How will you make sure it is realized? We cannot selectively follow the Constitution on the matters that suit us, but on matters 2/3 we don't. I will not speak again later, so there's someone who has asked a question from the public, that in Kenya today, the holder of a law degree is not eligible for admission to the role of advocates unless they attend the advocates training program and pass their bar exams. Currently, ATP is only offered at the Kenya School of Law. And so there have been attempts to review the law that mandates this. And so there's, and the attempts have been received with different divergent legal view. What is your position on this?
Thank you, Chairman. Mine to the nominee, the Office of Attorney General, is practical one, which is, nominee, I want to know, or the people of Kenya, in assessing your suitability, we want to know, what is your opinion or vision on these contracts or clauses in contracts that a government entity enters with international companies? And in those clauses, the clauses inside those contracts, and I've seen it from being chairman PIC, where Kenya lose money, they put a clause to say that if there's a conflict in that contract, that the arbitration or the legal resolution will be done, for example, in London. And yet, Madam Nominee, through the chairman, the money is paid is 100% exchequer, which means it's our money. And our case in point is GDC, where Kenya lost hundreds of millions of money in London through something I call kangaroo court called arbitration, where people can agree to fleece people's money and agree.
Arbitrations are legitimate courts within both our system and the international systems. They cannot be called kangaroo courts. That's not a fair comment.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, but that's my opinion. Maybe it's different from the legal practice, but I found it a kangaroo court, Honorable Speaker, that just people sit down and agree. And Kenyans, Madam Nominee, through my speaker, has lost a lot of money through that process. So what's your opinion? Can we change the law and have a contract, particularly where Kenyan money, which is exchequer, maybe if it's a loan, that's a different way. What is your opinion on that, Madam Nominee, so that Kenyans don't lose money as we lost through GDC? I thank you, Speaker, in that kangaroo court.
Not being a lawyer yourself, we forgive you. Go on, Gikaria.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have this question.
Yes, Junet.
Speaker, I thought Honorable Koseng is a lawyer. I saw him that time when we had the cases in Hague. I saw him carrying a lot of documents and saying that he's filing cases in Hague, and
that is exactly what he was doing, carrying documents. That doesn't make you a lawyer. Go on, Dorcas.
Point of order, Speaker.
Go on, sorry, Gikaria.
Chair, there is this review of the Constitution. There is a call for us to review the Constitution, either be it through the parliamentary initiative or the popular initiative. on some quarters, like not having even the opposition leader in parliament and things like that. And also the very thin line between, like what happened just there recently, on a constitutional issue under Article 37 and the Public Order Act. Maybe in your view, Madam Nominee, what, in your view, are the sections that we need to look for in terms of the constitutional amendment, particularly to be able to align some of those very thin lines between Article 37 and the Public Order Act, where you have to balance the two for us to realize? So maybe in your view, which areas do we need to look for the amendment in the Constitution? Thank you.
Yes, Nominee, can you deal?
Chairman, and my colleagues, my apologies. It has something to do with what I had asked. I just want to know the past costly AG advices to government, mainly driven by vested in-house manipulative cartels, especially in Treasury, and official systems operatives in huge government development projects. I'd like to know your view on that.
You can respond to those three honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir.
But also don't call arbitrations kangaroo, because they are not.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee. I am not privy to any advice of an Attorney General under whom I served that was not taken by the executive. As to what I would do if my advice is not taken, I take it that the Constitution provides that the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor to government in legal matters. I look at the President as a vision bearer of the whole country. As he receives advice from the Office of the Attorney General, he has to take into account other sectors, because the law does not exist in a vacuum. He has to take into account socio-economic matters, security matters, and I believe he not only gets advice from the Attorney General, but also from those other sectors. It is the culmination of all these advices from different sectors, in which I have no expertise to give, that the President of the Republic of Kenya would make a decision. If the President of the Republic of Kenya is the vision bearer and everybody under him is working towards achieving the vision of the government of the day, I do not see where there can be a conflict. Otherwise, for me, I would give efficient, professional advice, which is just, which is fair, which is objective, which is truthful, and which is in accordance with the Constitution. The lost cases in the judiciary, I think it is important for me to say that I am not able to comment on why specific cases are lost unless I am seized with the information. But I also think that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to put in place mechanisms to mitigate loss. And where loss is occasioned deliberately by an officer, to take action or to recommend action. The 2/3 gender rule. The Constitution provides that in all appointive and elective posts, one gender should not be more than 1/3, 2/3. I think this is an issue that has been litigated. This is an issue that is before this House. And I would be cautious in commenting on it unless I see what is before Parliament and what is in the Office of the Attorney General and the initiative. But I know that in the Office of the Attorney General, in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we have reached the threshold. Legal education and CLE. This is a rowdy place. Very, very rowdy. Very rowdy. And I say that because I live with some of those people. I have seen them. I empathize and sympathize with them. I understand that there are two task forces that are given reports to the Attorney General. Those reports are in the office of the Attorney General. And pursuant to those reports, there are 2 bills pending before Parliament to harmonize legal education, to set standards, accreditation. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am told that in some instances, you go to an accredited university, but when you go to the School of Law, you are not allowed or you are not admitted. I know these people are frustrated, and that is my priority, to go and look at these 2 reports, to look at what is pending in Parliament, and to make sure that we recall it back, because this was 3-4 years ago. There could be some intervening factors to make sure that we are responsive, because these people need a closure and they need to know they legitimately expected that after learning law, they would be admitted. So I do agree, this is a very rowdy area, it is frustrating, and it calls for priority, and it will be one of my priorities if I'm accorded an opportunity to serve. At the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, having found that this was a problem, we created a cadre called legal interns. We tried to bring in people who had gone through the School of Law, but for one reason or another could not be admitted because they were frustrated. In fact, we started by getting in 100 and we distributed them. But apparently that was not in accordance with what Treasury expected, so we had no money. So we stopped it. I also think that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to relook at pupillage, so that we can structure some pupillage mechanism within the executive, so that we can absorb some of these children. It is an area that, as an Attorney General, as an advocate, and having been the Secretary of Public Prosecutions, I admit it is an area that needs urgent call. Thank you. I was asked about the vision, the vision of the office. Mr. Speaker, and honorable members, under the Constitution of Kenya, the Attorney General is the principal advisor to the government, also represents the government in courts. At the same time, the Attorney General is supposed to act in public interest. It occurs to me that the Attorney General is wearing 2 hats. He is a lawyer, he is also a minister. But this public-facing, public interest part has not been very clear. Therefore, I vision to be an Attorney General who will actualize the vision of an Attorney General under the Constitution. Be a principal legal advisor to the government, represent the government efficiently and adequately, and at the same time, protect public interest, uphold rule of law, protect human rights, good governance and accountability. I will be a responsive Attorney General and a lawyer of the people. And I hope the Office of the Attorney General will work with all the peoples of Kenya in realizing our aspirations under the Constitution. When it comes to contracts which are eschewed, Honorable Speaker, sir, I don't have any information on this, but if confirmed, I would make sure that we come up with some SOPs, standard operating procedures. We set standards, and we make sure that the Attorney General is actually represented and reliably represented in the contracts from the beginning to the end. Because unless you look at the quality of the contract and you mitigate any loss or any risk, it is very difficult to succeed in the end. So there is a need for an Attorney General to be represented from the beginning, to look at the clauses to make sure that they're responsive to what we need and that they protect us. At the same time, should we feel that some of the clauses will be injurious to us, we could review. That calls for expertise and very professional state counsel. The third question was on constitutional review. Mr. Speaker, sir, and members, the Constitution is a live document. And within the Constitution itself, there are provisions for review, which means that there is room to review and amend the Constitution. However, the rule of law requires that all laws of Kenya are made by the participation or with the participation of the people. They must be clear, they must be available, and they must be able to be legislated. For that reason, it is only the people of Kenya who can say what they want to change in a constitution, because they have to be part and parcel of the law. The office of the Attorney General can just be facilitative. Having had our constitution for the last 15 years, I would agree with those who are saying we are now ripe to relook at the constitution to see what is working or not working. And this was provided for in the constitution and under the rule of law attributes. A law that is not working should be reviewed, should be amended so that it is responsive, so that it can speak to the times that we live in. So I will facilitate such. Yes. Thank you.
I will take another batch of 3. Let's start with Robert Mbui, Owen Baya, Murugara. Daud, hold your horses.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. To the nominee, having worked in the office of the DPP, and noting that after we did our vetting in 2022, some of the nominees who had criminal cases against them, immediately after they were appointed, those cases were dropped. Now, as a legal advisor to the executive, if approved, one of the newly appointed CSs, the one for cooperative, the Honorable Wycliffe Mbetsa Oparanya, he confirmed on oath while he was here that the EACC has been used as a political tool to frustrate him when he was not in government. Now, I have 2 issues that I want you to maybe make a comment on. First and foremost, why should EACC be asked to give an opinion when it doesn't matter? Because the opinion given by EACC did not matter in the vetting process, yet we have to fill those documents even when you apply for public office like a member of parliament. 2, what will you do about the government's, what advice will you give, legal advice will you give to the government security organs and legal entities or legal teams, EACC, DCI, DPP, on politicizing and weaponizing their offices? And finally, how will you ensure that justice is served to all those parents and people who lost their lives, who are injured and who lost valuable assets during the recent demonstrations? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. This nominee, I've only seen her on TV and newspapers. Now I have opportunity to interact with her. Yeah. But I just want to ask this question, Honorable Speaker. Drafting is very key, especially on laws. And that's probably the link between executive and parliament, is how those laws come in, having passed through the AG's office. I have looked at your CV and I've listened to you. You're a very good litigant or prosecuting lawyer. But I haven't seen your strength in drafting of laws, which is probably one of the key areas that we will need to have in that office to avoid this idea of losing cases as government and passing bad laws. I haven't seen that as strength on your CV. So how will you really help this country moving forward in terms of good laws and good legislation? Secondly, a lot of these laws that have gone to court have fallen on the sword of public participation, which is a key tenet in the Constitution. And everything that we do right now, and every person who goes to court and says there was no public participation, even when public participation has been seen to be done, judges rule in favor of those litigants. What is public participation? What is the correct public participation to you? Or what are you going to do to protect Parliament and this government from that? And lastly, if you allow me, Honorable Speaker, if you look at Section 43 of the County Government Act, it is very clear that the Attorney General may assist counties in matters apart from criminal cases. That is what Section 43 of the County Government Act says. And actually it goes back to Article 156(4) of the Constitution. But county governments have been using colossal sums of money to hire lawyers without regard to the fact that the Attorney General's job to actually defend county governments. How are we going to stop this hemorrhage of money from county governments through payment to lawyers? I know the lawyers are listening to me and may not be very happy about this, but it is a tenant in the
in the room. Careful.
It is.
There's one next to you.
It is that monumental amounts. You look at Nairobi County Government; they are running billions in terms of legal fees, and yet it is the duty of the Office of the Attorney General to assist counties in legal matters. How are you going to, do you think we need an instrument of law so that we can define the role of the Attorney General in counties? Counties are now setting up things called county attorneys, and they are basically lawyers in there at the county attorney's office, but they don't even go to court. They pay these lawyers, but then they pay external lawyers huge fees. How are you going to stop this? Because I think it is corruption. How are you going to stop it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Nominee, the office you're just about to take over is a pale shadow of what it used to be. And if we draw parallels, when it used to be held by Sir Charles Njonjo, the first black man to be the AG, and what you're taking over as the first lady, if you're approved by this House. Almost everything is lost. And recently, we had as Parliament to try and salvage your position by returning the power to recruit staff back to you. And in fact, the same time also, the AG was going to lose the only asset that was left under his armpit, which was the public seal. That tells you how eroded the office is. As the incoming AG, if you are approved, what areas do you think should be recovered and returned to the office so that it is given the dignity that it used to have, which dignity possibly is now lost? Secondly, unsatisfied judgments are a nightmare in this country. If I'm not wrong, I think you owe Kenyans, or the government owes Kenyans to the tune of about 1.6 trillion in unsatisfied judgments. What are you going to do about this? Or would you agree with me that we should be amending the Government Proceedings Act and open up government property to attachment by auctioneers to satisfy judgments that are unpaid? And lastly, the CLE, the Council for Legal Education, which I think is as old as legal practice in the country, which started with those practices of articled clerks at the Kenya School of Law of the same time. Do you think there is any necessity of having CLE and Kenya School of Law at the same time? Or should we now merge these two so that once you go to Kenya School of Law, you come out as an advocate, even if there are regulations formulated by CLE, but this idea of exams are by CLE, education or teaching is by KSL, is misnomer as far as we are concerned. What will be your position as regards those two dockets? And finally, as the AG, will you be prepared, and can you tell Kenyans that you will actually stand up personally as a seasoned lawyer, litigator of many years standing to defend our government in courts? Because the reason why we have lost most of these cases, to be frank, is because you do not have experienced advocates there. Number two, those you sent are junior and possibly are missed meat to seasoned lawyers out there who sue the government. Will you stand up and defend that government personally?
Nominee.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir. and honorable members, I was asked why the EACC should give an opinion. Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, I think this issue of vetting is also murky, because even at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we get requests to clear people from different agencies. And we have been wondering on what capacity we would do that. So I wouldn't want to comment on why the EACC is giving an opinion, but I would want to say that the whole procedure of vetting needs to be relooked at so that what we do is impactful and informs decision making. What I would do if cases are being weaponized and politicized, as far as I'm concerned, public officers act in good faith, are required to follow the Constitution, to act in the public interest and the interest of administration of justice. Whoever does the opposite is not a public officer, is a criminal. I was told that drafting is very key. And I have not drafted any. When I was introducing myself, I articulated the legislations that I have personally led and have gone through this parliament and have never been declared unconstitutional. One, the Mutual Legal Assistance Act, the Anti-Corruption Legislations, the Organized Crimes Act, the Transfer of Prisoners Act, Cybercrime Legislation, the ODPP Act, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, and several policies and procedures. And I can assure you that none of them has been declared unconstitutional. What is public participation? Public participation should be meaningful and impactful. As to what public participation should be is also a dicey area. And I think this is one area where we are testing our constitution. We have not come up with parameters of what is public participation. I think there is a need for a policy to give guideline or regulation on what public participation is. It might require a policy and then legislation, because I think Kenyans must be given an opportunity themselves to say what they want to see in terms of public participation. But it is an area that needs urgent consideration. And as we have agreed that our constitution is ripe for review, because it is provided for under the constitution, maybe this is one of those areas that will go back to Kenyans to relook at. Thank you. The image of the Office of the Attorney General. Oh.
Pardon?
The question on the county.
Yes. The question on county governments.
And the legal fees.
Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members, the impact of county governments is one of the areas that the interplay between the national government and the county governments is a bit cloudy. And should we have an opportunity to relook at our constitution, I think that is one area where we should put effort to see whether the objects of devolution are being achieved. From the perspective of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we also had that problem, where county attorneys were representing people or coming up with criminal laws without the participation of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So I think when we download the functions that are given to the county governments and the national government, there is need to give guideline on where the boundary is, how far they can go. Because if we don't act together, there's no unity of purpose, we act in cross purposes, then the person who is benefiting is the person who is the enemy of our country. So I think that is one area that we need to relook at. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, my question, last one was not answered.
Which one?
Which is?
I just wanted, as a legal advisor of the executive, and we talked about, I just mentioned the issue of the recent demos and the people that were injured, killed. His Excellency the President himself talked about compensation. I wanted to get your comment on that and what advice you would give,
My
because
apologies.
the government would be the one that stands accused.
My apologies.
Go ahead.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, as the custodian of people's rights, the Attorney General is also expected to uphold the rights of the people who have been injured and complainants and victims. I am aware that there is a Victims Compensation Act that has been legislated by this August House. There is an initiative to operationalize the Victim Compensation Board, which is under the Office of the Attorney General. As a prosecutor, compensation of victims is a very important tool in the fight against corruption, because many instances we have complainants who lose things. Either they are taken by accused persons or they are injured by people in government, but they don't get compensated. To buttress the gaps that I was talking about in the criminal justice system, I think the Victim Compensation Act and the Victim Compensation Board, I'm sorry if I don't get the names right, that fall under the Office of the Attorney General should be operationalized so that we give the parameters and the standards of compensation of victims. And that will also be a priority.
Morugara's questions? Many short ones. So you can run through them quickly.
Yes. The image of the Office of the Attorney General. It is my vision that if I'm confirmed, I would strive to make sure that the Office of the Attorney General is that office that is described under the Constitution, that it is the people's lawyer. Whether or not I will meet that standard will depend on my actions. I have been given the tools, I have been given the legislations, and it is my hope with proper support and the support of this House, we are able to make that office what it ought to be. Whether or not I will be able to go to court to defend the government, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee, I will lead from the front. About CLE, I'd already talked about it. And I wouldn't want to go into the nuances of the report, but I think this is one of the issues that is captured. So once confirmed, I will go back and relook at those reports and review the two legislations that are pending before Parliament.
If confirmed.
I'm sorry, my lord. He almost made me think that I'd already been confirmed. Sorry. I'm sorry, sir. If confirmed, I will again go and relook at those two reports and look at the two legislations that are pending before this House, and it will be a priority, and I will be coming back to you with proposals, and I will be coming back to you to seek assistance. And you have helped me when I was in the office of the DPP. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Big pending cumulative awards.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I am informed and I know that some of these awards maybe are not big, but it is the interest that accrue, especially if it is compound interest. To enable me satisfactorily answer that, once, if I am confirmed, I undertake to take an audit of what is pending, the reasons why they are pending, the challenges in satisfying the orders, and I'll be able to give a satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Can we have Daoud, Honorable Emase, Honorable Mukami, those three? Then we'll be left with the remainder. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senior Counsel, you just mentioned that Constitution, you would consider Constitution changes if possible. I want to put it to you because I've given to our Speaker I'm waiting for the legal counsel from Parliament to draft it. Would you consider that because of the Gen Zs, particularly now, I have made a suggestion where we need to do away with the Senate. I have said we do not need to have governors. We revert back probably to mayors of counties who would run the political angle of the county, whereas the administrative would have clerks like town clerks used to be there before. With that, then we establish a committee in Parliament, which in the National Assembly, by the way, when I say Parliament, I mean just National Assembly and not the Senate, where we would have a committee on devolution to take care of the counties, so that we reduce all that baggage which is there, because basically Senate takes care of counties, which can be done by a committee of Parliament, of National Assembly. The same thing can be done. Would you consider something like that to be feasible for change of the law? I know it may involve the referendum or something. Secondly, the Office of the Public Trustee, until 3 months back, I never knew they would do a succession case, which has been done. There was a property I bought from somebody, and they had gone through a public trustee instead of going through succession in court, which takes a lot of money and time as well. But the problem was public trustee took more time than a succession course. Would you consider devolving all, if you are approved, the public trustee to each and every county? Because currently what is there in our region is in the old provincial headquarters, that is Embu. Would you consider, and would you publicize it so that many people know that there is an office of public trustee which can do those cases, and I think they're practically free. There is not much involved in that. Would you consider that? Thank you.
Honorable Emase.
Thank you. Speaker, through you, my concern still goes to public participation. I know it's been mentioned, but I'm asking it in a different context. Nominee, the Attorney General's office is a lead coordinating agency on the realization of the draft Kenya policy and public participation. But Kenyans are dissatisfied with the manner in which we conduct public participation. And recently, most of the legislators have suffered in the hands of our constituents because they feel there was no transparent and accessible public participation. Now, in view of the public expectations, what are your thoughts on public participation? Because as it stands now, the committee conducting public participation sits in some boardroom or hotel in Nairobi, receives submissions from members of the public who are able to get to that venue, while those in far-flung areas are left with online avenue to send their submissions through email or whichever other means. So, in view of the dissatisfaction by the public, what are your thoughts about how we should conduct our public participation going forward? My second concern goes to the Advocates Complaints Commission and the Disciplinary Tribunal. Again, I put it to you that many Kenyans are suffering in the hands of rogue lawyers. They receive benefits on behalf of the clients, they squander. They are given services and paid, they don't deliver. And it takes almost forever for these Kenyans to get any redress. Are these institutions effective? Or what are you going to do, if approved, to ensure that Kenyans get redress when they find themselves in these situations? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. To the nominee, The weakest link in the fight against corruption is a prosecution of persons accused of economic crimes. The other day, again, I went to Nyeri prison, and I realized that the most poor people, the young mothers, those who don't have lawyers to represent them, they are the ones who are rotting in jail. And yet, they have petty crimes. I would really like to know what you are going to do about it, if approved. Thank you.
Nominee, answer those three.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker and honorable members. As I had said before, we exercise liberal democracy by the people and for the people. And the rule of law requires that when we make laws, people must participate in making of laws. The laws must be available. The laws must be accessible. It is therefore my submission, Mr. Speaker, sir, as to what should be changed in the constitutional constitution or reviewed in the constitution will depend on what Kenyans will decide. I would therefore be happy if part of those recommendations are part of the things that Kenyans would recommend, then they will take the natural legislative process. I'm not able to answer as a person because the process has to start from the people. But if accepted, they will be part of what will be reviewed. The Office of the Public Trustee. It is not that I will do or whether I will do. If approved to this position, I am aware that the Cabinet has directed the Office of the Attorney General to decentralize to the 47 counties. I am aware this is one of the people-facing departments whose services are required to the lowest level. It will therefore be my responsibility and priority to make sure that the Public Trustee Department is devolved and decentralized. Secondly, there is a need to conduct public education and awareness on the services being rendered by this department. If approved, I undertake from the first week to put in a mechanism where the Office of the Attorney General will conduct cafes. We did this from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, where every Friday would have an ODPP cafe, where deputy directors, prosecution counsel, and even experts from outside would educate Kenyans. So I will approach it from the purview of strategic communication. I will involve the media, civil society, and Kenyans, and make sure that the services of the Office of the Attorney General are taken to the people, are unknown to the people. I also know that the rule of law requires that laws and procedures must be available in a language that we understand. There is a need, Mr. Speaker, sir, so many years after independence, all criminal laws and procedures and all laws are still in English. People cannot access them. Deaf people cannot access them. There is a need for us to make that law accessible in a manner and in a language that can be understood by the people. So there's also a need to make those services understandable and accessible in a manner that people can understand. Thanks.
Speaker, I just want clarification on the constitutional amendment which I've spoken about. Yes. The nominees...
Okay, he asked whether you will support a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, she has said it has to come from the public. So are you telling us that as legislators, if we bring that constitutional amendment, if it is approved through the Speaker, that it may fail because of it has not originated from the public?
Both the honourable member and the nominee, the process of amending the Constitution is defined in the Constitution itself. It can't be any different. You can bring a constitutional amendment bill. You can go by way of popular initiative that will lead to a referendum. So none of you is limited in what you can do, except that it must be done in accordance with the Constitution itself.
Okay. because she
It
just
is not
mentioned
what
it
she
would be
thinks.
done through public participation only.
No,
If I heard her right.
Did you say that, nominee?
Honorable Sir, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, I said it has to be by the people, and the House represents the people.
Go ahead.
I was asked about public participation. Riding from the recent court case, we have been guided that public participation should be meaningful and impactful. As to what should be public participation is where the problem is. And as I had said before, there is a need for us to come up with standards and involve the public to come up with standards and expectation of what public participation should be. And once we have that, we'll be able to direct and make sure that every legislation goes through the envisaged standard and expectation of the people.
Honorable Speaker, if I can.
Maybe if I can, I rarely participate at this level, but I want to ask you, what we are grappling with